the thought of trying to give you a good variety of topics, of speakers that have different backgrounds and experiences. I have really enjoyed that. I've talked with many of you and asked which their favorite speaker is. It's bounced around quite a bit because all of us have different perspectives, and I think that's what's huge about entrepreneurship, is the problems and the challenges that you experience in your life is what helps you drive innovation that makes sense for you. And I really, one of the most favorite thing is to bring in speakers like the one we have today. Dennis Steele is here. Eric was called away to Australia today, and Dennis is a co-founder, is the partner with Eric of Podium. And Dennis was in school and graduated in 2013. That's like 5 years ago. And since that time frame, you heard it from Sid last week, that one of the most impressive stories is just how they've started a business 4 years ago, and they've already raised over $100 million in funding. The valuation of the building is, upwards of $500 million. They have blown it out of the water, and he's not that much older than, in fact, he's probably younger than a lot of us. So it's great to have Dennis here to tell us the story of Podium and what they went through to go for it. He's married, has 3 kids. He's big into CrossFit. In fact, one of the key aspects of their business, they have a pretty nice CrossFit gym in their new building there. You see it as you drive north on the freeway. So, ladies and gentlemen, our final speaker of the semester, Dennis Steele.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and talk to you guys, tell you about this story we've had at Podium. It's been an awesome journey, amazing journey. It's kind of one of those storybook startup experiences, and so excited to share that with you. I'm going to kind of run through a little bit of the chronological history and share some lessons learned throughout that. And then leave plenty of time for questions and answers, so I can really, hopefully, answer and help you guys understand anything that you guys want to. So, how many people have heard of Podium? Okay, a lot. That's good. That's still surprising to me. How many know exactly what Podium does? A lot less. 2, 3. See some Podium swag. That's cool. So Podium is a customer interaction platform for businesses. So we help local businesses communicate with their customers through messaging, which is super important today, right? Most businesses are only comfortable with email and phone, but everything we do today is all on our phones, and most local businesses can't handle that. So Podium is a platform to help businesses communicate with their customers on those channels. And we help them get reviews and feedback through that as well. So that's what Podium does. Solving a real problem for real businesses, and it generates a lot of revenue. So as Mark said, it was not too long ago that I was sitting basically in your exact seat over at BYU. Went to BYU and participated a lot in the entrepreneurship program while I was there. Really influential on basically setting the stage to have Podium do what it did. But looking back to those times, sitting in those seats, listening to local entrepreneurs come and tell their story, super inspiring. But I also just had this thought of like, man, is that really possible? So the exciting thing about today is just how there are not that many barriers to go out and make something like Podium happen and have huge success, right? I was just talking to a friend the other day. 8 months ago, he started a little business with his buddy. They're doing over $1 million in revenue, which is really hard to do in the first year. We were able to do that as well. And there's just so many tools and things out there for you to go start something and test it out. Super exciting time to be able to do that. And just really grateful that landscape was the same just a few years ago when we started Podium. So, to talk a little bit about that phase when I was in school. There was probably a dozen ideas. I met Eric, my co-founder, when I was at school. We were both super passionate about ideas, kind of figuring out business ideas, digging in, trying to validate ideas. there was a bunch of ideas that we started while at BYU and we failed at. And that doesn't get told a lot, but it's super important in actually figuring out how to have a success. So see another Podium sweatshirt, that's awesome. It's super important in how to figure out how to have a success. One of the biggest things that we did, though, when I look back at all those ideas we failed on, is we spent a lot of time on things that didn't matter. So this is an example, and I see this a lot of times with early entrepreneurs, is this one idea, and it actually is a really successful business now. It was paperless contracts for the iPad. We were doing door-to-door selling at the time. That's how I met Eric. We wanted to solve that problem. It's a great business now, but it wasn't very good timing. We went out and pitched at the BYU pitch competition. We said, we're going to get rid of paper contracts, and we held up the iPad, and like no one was into it. So not the right timing. But what we did is when we were excited about that idea, I remember spending the next like 2 to 3 weeks trying to figure out what the name of the business was going to be. We really wanted a good name. And so we spent like 3 weeks figuring out the name, and then I spent like 2.5 weeks in Photoshop, and I don't really know what I'm doing in Photoshop, like trying to figure out the coolest logo. And I was just wasting my time on something that didn't matter, right? The name doesn't matter. You have to go out and validate your idea and figure out if people are going to buy your product. And so see that a lot. Definitely a lesson I learned as we were really trying to come up with ideas of businesses we wanted to go tackle, not spending time on things that didn't matter. So we went through that whole phase of BYU. We graduated together. We went out and got day jobs, so we were kind of disappointed that we didn't really like figure out what that business idea was going to be for us while we were in school. We met back up a year later, and at the time, I was doing kind of reviews and reputation management for clients online at a local agency. Eric was looking to start something up after working overseas, and his dad had a tire shop who was worrying about his online reviews and communicating with customers, and so we started collaborating on this idea. And within 3 weeks, we decided to build an MVP and start selling it door to door. And that was really the difference with Podium and getting it off the ground. It was the first idea that we were really committed to and going and actually validating. And that's really, I think, what separates like this stage where we used to look back and we called ourselves entrepreneurs, right? Because we were trying to play entrepreneur, but we weren't willing to fully commit and go validate an idea and go sell it. So there's this special moment that we remember, a story that I like to share of this early moment where we have this idea, we think we can solve for businesses, we want to help them get reviews online. We're sitting at my kitchen table in my apartment. We're sketching things out on notebooks, trying to figure out what the software would do for businesses. And we got to this point where we got stuck, and we're like, I don't know what the business owner would want to do because we're not business owners and we have no idea. So we're just banging our heads against the wall trying to figure this out. And Eric's like, dude, let's just go ask a local bit. Like, let's go ask somebody. We need help on this. And we figured out, well, actually, let's just go try to sell the product and see if we have any pushback. So we jumped on the phone. We looked for like the closest mechanic that we could find. And we went down to Honest One Auto down on Bulldog, if you know where that is, down in Provo. And we looked up the owner online, acted like we knew him, walked in and said, hey, we're here to talk to Bob. Is he available? And the front desk person was like, oh yeah, sure, like come back, he's in his office. So we went back there, acted like we had a meeting with him that he didn't remember about, setting or something. And we sat down, we pitched him this idea. And we told him, hey, we're going to be able to help you get reviews from your customers. We can text them while they're in the business, get reviews on Google for you. This is really going to change the way your business is working. So he kind of sat there, sat back, and he's like, you guys are really going to be able to do this? We're like, yeah, we're building the product right now, kind of. It's going to be ready in a couple weeks. It's usually $300, but since you're one of the first users, we can get you on $200 a month. And he looked at us and he said, okay, I'm in. You sign me up. This is awesome if it really does what you say it's going to do. And just to let you guys know, if you really pull this off, every business is going to want this, and you guys are going to be millionaires. We're like, oh, okay, yeah, we think it's going to be, really cool too. We tried to keep a straight face. We walked out, we got in the car, we started driving away while keeping a straight face. Then we pulled over and we just celebrated for like 5 minutes. High fives, dude, can you believe this? He said we were gonna be millionaires. Validation, right? That was the validation. We went and we sold this guy. He said he was gonna sign up. And that was the difference with this idea. Now we felt, oh man, we can commit to this, right? We have somebody willing to write a check, give us their credit card on subscription. This is going to be big. So for the next 2 weeks, we go up and we sign up 10 other mechanics without a product. They all signed up saying they were going to get on right as we released this thing. And we basically looked at the calculations, looked at how much it was going to cost to build this little software MVP. And we said, let's do it. $750 each, let's put this money in. If all 10 sign up, or at least half of them will still be cash flow positive, and we can start bootstrapping this thing. And that's what happened. We went and got, I think 8 out of those 10 actually did give us their credit card and sign up. And we started cash flowing on the business and selling every day and setting up the stage for this business. So that was, I look back at that as a key moment, like going out and validating your idea. Thinking of the biggest idea you can go solve for businesses or for consumers or whatever you're trying to solve. Think of the biggest one, right? Don't think small, and go out and validate it. Just go and do it, and that's what separates the entrepreneur with the entrepreneurs. So that's the stage that we're at. We're trying to build, this customer base. We're going door to door. It's what we knew, right? We sold alarms together. So we're going door to door here in Utah Valley and signing people up. We realized we need to learn a lot on the product side, so we started taking Dev Mountain classes at night. So we'd get up, we'd start selling all day long. Actually, first thing in the morning, we worked with our developers overseas. We'd sell all day long, and then we'd go to Dev Mountain programming classes from like 8 to 10 at night, right? Or 6 to 10 or whatever the classes were. So, eating, drinking, sleeping, startup at this point. Learning everything we need to learn, and doing everything we could to make this thing successful. So I actually have an interesting video to kind of set the stage here. Well, hopefully this pulls up. But this is us in our bedroom, in Eric's spare bedroom. This is our office. And there's a little bit of thought in the back of your head, like, hey, this could turn into something successful someday. But, you're still kind of doubting yourself a little bit. But you want to believe, right? And I think I am the same, like, this is where it all starts. And I think I'm half kidding when I say that. But this kind of gives you an idea of what it was like at that time.
All right, welcome to the Rep Drive headquarters. This is where it all started. We got Eric's space station over here.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of the coding goes on. Look at it, he's got 8 windows open. It's amazing how productive he can be. I got my little station over here. I only have 1 monitor, but I'm good. Yeah, this is where it starts. This is where we make deals and make it happen.
So yeah,
all right.
Not super exciting, right? Like it's just us two. We're kind of faking this, pretending like we're gonna have something big someday. But there is that belief that if we keep working at this, it's gonna turn something big. So we continue that on. We meet some investors. I think you met Sid last week. Amazing investor from Peak Ventures. Met with him. He was just starting out his venture capitalist career, and we go in. And again, this is just kind of the rawness of when you're starting a business and you don't know that much. We went into a partner meeting with Sid. He was expecting a pitch from a startup on how they needed to give funding. We didn't even know if we wanted to take funding. And we left the meeting and we had to go look up on Google what a cap table was. We had no idea. Positive, we can keep running this without any support, outside support. And if you guys invest, it's just gasoline on the fire. And it was pretty compelling. So Peak Ventures and Kickstart Seed Fund, they invest $500K. We think that's all that we're ever going to raise. We're never going to need more than $500K. That's so much money. And we were off to the races. And the next phase of the business was in the bike shop, right? So something that is synonymous with Podium history, and you might hear it a lot. And if you go to our headquarters up on the 5th floor, we actually have a replica, or a kind of Podium's version of a replica, of downtown Provo bike shop windows with bikes in them to remind us of this history that we had. 2015, the year above the bike shop. So to set the stage a bit, we get our funding and we hire our first employee from Adobe. His name's Arthur Weigel. He's one of our chief architects at Podium Still, a huge part of the business today. And as employee number one, we basically went to him and said, hey, you have a really comfortable, nice six-figure job at Adobe, right? But we're a funded startup and we want to go do something big, come join us. And it takes the right person to do that, but it also takes a strong belief in yourself to say, hey, put your family on the line, make a sacrifice, quit your job, come join us. I remember that moment sitting there and convincing people to quit their jobs and come join Podium or move across the country, and we're still thinking, like, in the back of our minds, is this going to work out? And you have to convince this person to change their life and believe in that. And so, again, believe in what you're doing, right? Have a passion around it. Don't just pursue an idea because there's money behind it. Because when the rubber hits the road and you have to go have people join you, there has to be a belief in what you're doing and kind of a bigger cause than just like, hey, we can make some money together, right? There has to be something deeper there. And that is still what drives a lot of the culture at Podium today, just being really passionate about what we're trying to accomplish as a software company. So Arthur joins us, and we're above this bike shop. No AC, it's like a 100-year-old building. Newskin owned it and hadn't invested anything in it. No AC, no heat, so during the winter, we're going in with our winter coats. We're typing on the keyboards. We can see our breath, literally, like sitting there, like writing emails. I remember trying to write this proposal to Vivint Solar to sign up, and being in a winter coat and just seeing my breath and thinking, like, what are we doing? And we're asking for a $120,000 contract from Vivint Solar, and it's just the early stages, right? You got to go do a lot of convincing. So they signed the contract. We were growing extremely fast, 0 to 2 million in revenue in that first year, and established that foundation of being willing to sacrifice and spend those long nights in the attic of the bike shop and really figuring out the product and the go-to-market there. So just another really important phase of the company. The next phase is scaling, right? So we established this product, we figured out the product market fit, we hired that initial team. Peak Ventures were really important in that. Sid helped us hire half of that initial founding team. We had that foundation, and now it was time to scale. So we got accepted to Y Combinator, went out to the Bay Area for 3 months with some product managers, really focused on the product there, and started to scale the team. Started to bring on executives from other companies that had amazing experience and that were a great culture fit, and started to put the funding to work and scaling out the team. So that scaling has happened. We just hit 400 employees. We have our headquarters out in Lehigh. We're filling up the entire building, and like Mark said, it raised close to $100 million in funding from Excel. Google saw what we were doing, flew out to Japan. Not sure if Google was going to shut us down or be excited about what we were doing. Luckily, they were excited, and the whole deck that we built to kind of defend ourselves to Google was useless, and they said, how can we help you guys succeed? So it was awesome. Google ended up investing, and now what we see we can do is be an interaction platform for all local businesses in the U.S. or in the world, right? Eric's out in Australia opening our office there. We've been setting that up in the past year to expand internationally. So that is kind of a snapshot of a quick chronological history, some early lessons, some important lessons that I learned along the way. Want to take a long time now to kind of do an interactive question and answer want to dig into the areas you guys are most interested in, and being insightful as possible. So, opening that up, questions?
So Mark mentioned that you are married and have 3 kids.
Yeah.
So how did you deal with your family life and your startup?
That's a great question. Great question.
Repeat that so that.
Yeah, so the question is, how do I balance family life and like this extremely demanding startup life? And how have I done that in the last few years? So, 3 kids, they're all 3 and under. So, I was trying to grow the family as fast as the business. No. Didn't really work out that way. But, yeah, we have a 3-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-month-old. So, very demanding on the family side, growing the family quickly. And that's always, you know, it's a difficult challenge, right? Work-life balance is difficult. I think, and it's difficult for everybody joining a startup at the beginning, right? Whether you're the founding members or early team members, there's just a lot of sacrifice that goes into getting stuff off the ground and getting it scaling. So one of the things that helps out the most is, again, going back to doing something that you're passionate about and not just doing something for the money, right? When you ask, and I think this is kind of universal for a lot of the employee base at Podium, but I was working harder than I ever had in my life, right? But when I would come home and I did have time with my wife and my family, I was more fulfilled and satisfied than I ever had been as well, right? So I was putting more time in at work, but I was much more happy than when I was putting a lot less time in that day job that I had right after college, right? So I actually feel that if you're kind of aligning your passions with what you're doing, and you can feel that, you can actually have really good work-life balance, even though it can be really demanding at times. It actually helps you give more with the time that you do have with your family. Well, hopefully that answers your question. Yeah. What other questions? Yeah, right here.
So you said that you both went to Dev Mountain
Yeah.
to start off. I have a couple of questions. First off, do you feel that was a good choice for you both? And then the next question is, what languages first started learning?
Oh yeah, okay. So the question is, was Dev Mountain helpful at that time? And what languages were we kind of learning at the time? So Dev Mountain was extremely helpful for me, right? I didn't have a coding background. My co-founder Eric he was an ISIS major, so he had some development experience. But we were working with these developers overseas, and we wanted to really be able to be like true product managers of the product. And it's hard to do that with kind of a disconnect in the technology. And so Dev Mountain for me was extremely helpful. I know Eric would say the same. Getting in, even though we were like not working on our project, we were still learning, and we were still, after that, we were able to connect so much better with our developers. And I think the other thing it did was it really paved a way to have a strong development culture with Podium. So you might see this with some businesses, is as soon as they get some validation on the idea, and this is easy to do in Utah because we have such an amazing like sales force base of employees here, or potential employees, right? The sales is so strong in Utah. It's really easy to just go and scale something that might not be like the best product. And it's a balance. You can't spend all your time just trying to build the best product and not selling. But you got to keep that balance in check. And so early on, Dev Mountain really helped us have a really strong product focus. We realized how important it was. And that culture goes still today. We're a product-driven company. The first thing we always try to answer is what's the best experience for the customer. If we achieve that, if you build something that is really solving the problem for the customer, then the revenue and everything takes care of itself. And we've seen that. It's been a testament to the growth, and we're going to continue to do that. Languages, at that time, was the whole course was focused on like Node and Angular and JavaScript were kind of like the 3 things. Angular was, most of the projects we did were in Angular and Node. It's not what the product today is built on at Podium, but it's good. Yeah.
Is there a difference between being a founder of a company and like being the CEO? Like, those two always like translate. Like, if I'm a good founder, like if I can create like a
Yeah.
does that mean that can be a good CEO as well of that business?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, if you're a really good founder, is there a difference between like being a founder of a company and a CEO of the company? That's a great question. So, Eric Ray is the CEO, my partner, co-founder. He's the CEO of Podium. I'm the CSO, Chief Strategy Officer, and co-founder. You always had that founder title, right? We started the business 50-50 partners, right? So full kind of co-founders of this business. And for the first, I would say, kind of year and a half, we're doing everything together. We didn't really adopt titles early on. You kind of have to feel that out and see how that goes. But we were kind of co-founders, at one point kind of co-CEOs. Eric has the perfect personality traits to be an awesome CEO. So it was kind of a great kind of fit for him to be the CEO and kind of take on that role. For me as a co-founder, I kind of had to figure out where I wanted to focus in. Because at the beginning, when you're running everything and making decisions together, when it's 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people, even up to like 50 people, right? You still have this view of the entire business, right? You're in on every important meeting, you're part of every important decision. But as the business grows and it scales, you have to narrow that focus. Even for the CEO too, right? Still broad view of the company, but narrowing the focus to like help the executive team. And so really you kind of have to figure out those roles. For me at Podium today, I work a lot on the partnership side. So I work with our top partners on the strategic partnership side, hugely impactful for the business. And it was an area where we brought an executive in who was really good at partnerships as well, was able to kind of mentor me and help me develop that skill. And you have to be humble enough to realize, yeah, I started this company, this is my business, right? But I don't have that much experience, right? And I can have maybe the best vision out of everybody of where we want this company to go and what we can do and inspire the other executives and the leaders. But you have to be humble enough to say, what areas can I learn and grow in? And so partnerships for me in the last 2 years has been one of those areas that I've focused in on. Been able to develop that skill over time from mentorship from other people we brought on the team. It's been really fun. Does that answer the question?
So it's okay to like give the reins to someone else if you're like, I have a vision, but I don't really know how to like run.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's totally okay to do that. I think it can be tough for people when you're making that transition, right? Because you're like, this is my baby, I want to run it. But there is an importance in saying, I have some skill sets, I have like this vision or strategy that I can offer, or maybe I'm really good at sales, or maybe I'm really good at product development or engineering, right? But I haven't built out teams, I haven't scaled a company, right? So to bring that experience on and be able to work with people who've done that before and find that balance is tricky, but it's really important to have success. And so you see that even with Arthur, right? He was, led engineering for a really long time, but we had to hire 100 developers, right? And that's like a hard task to do. And now our CTO is really good at building teams. He's at the top of his career, has built teams and helped sell companies. And being able to bring people on and work with them and kind of figure out where you can continue to add value and impact is super important. Great question. Yeah?
You mentioned that Sid helped you hire a few more people. Just want to know a little bit more about what that process was like for you.
Yeah. Great question. So Sid was able to help us hire a lot of people. What was that experience like? So we relied a lot on Sid, right? Like I said, we didn't know what a cap table was. We're in this bike shop, and we're making decisions every day on hiring, building out the team, how to scale sales. We didn't have experience in a lot of these areas. And so relying on an investor was really important for us, right? We were texting Sid almost every other day, meeting with him like every few days, right? Hey, what should we do about this? What should we do about this? Can you help us do this? Can you help us hire this guy, right? So I said Sid helped us hire. Most of them were referrals that he knew. He's like, hey, I have this sales guy. I think you guys are ready to talk to him. And then others was like having him interview them and telling us and giving us feedback on that person and helping us develop interviewing skills, right? So that was what that experience was like, just relying on people that can help you out. When I look back at that early first year in the bike shop, we were hitting up so many mentors. We'd get texting with them. Anytime we could get connected to like a local entrepreneur that could help guide us and give us advice, we took advantage of that. And what we wanted to do is avoid pitfalls. So it's really hard for like an outsider to tell you what you should do for your business. You probably have the best context for that. But mentors are really good on helping you avoid pitfalls and like common challenges that hurt companies early on. Yeah.
My mom and I used to own our own company, and I was wondering if you could speak to the fact that we had a lot of contractors, like 3-star generals, the head of American Red Cross, all of these different people that we were using for sounding boards, and that were on our board of directors saying, this is where we want to go with the company. And they would say, well, let's tweak it a little bit and bring it over here. And then another general would say, let's tweak it and bring it over here. And before you know it, we were spread so thin that we were no longer on our path.
Yeah.
And we ended up folding the company. We went under.
Yeah.
So how do you keep the people that you respect their opinions and you are looking for their assistance, how do you keep everybody on the same page so that they don't derail you? Even with the best of intentions.
Yeah, great question. So how do you manage investors or advisors or mentors in staying on, you know, the path or the vision that you have and not deviating or taking on too much that would kind of derail the company? Really difficult to balance that, right? And I think the biggest skill set to develop and learn is how to say no, right? And keep people still bought into your vision. Why? Why are you saying no to this? It seems pretty practical that you know, have this feature, or you have a big customer that's a lot of your revenue, and they say, we want you to build out this feature, we probably will cancel if you don't. How do you make that decision? We're willing to give up some revenue to stay on the path that we truly believe in. And looking back, we've done that a lot. We've said no a lot. And we've stayed true to a vision that we had based on a lot of input. You know, customer research is so key in figuring out what's going to be so important. But saying no and saying no in the right way so you keep people bought into the vision is a tricky skill to develop, but really, really important. I remember, and there's a couple blips, and when you look back, like most of my Podium is special, right? You look at the charts and everything is pretty crazy, right? As far as growth and everything we've been able to accomplish. But there are some blips of like times where we looked at a partner and they were paying us close to $500,000 in revenue, and they wanted to continue to do something on the product that wasn't a fit for everybody else, and we had to part ways. We said, you know, we can't service you, we can't support that feature anymore. It's not part of our core, and we had to say go. We had to say goodbye, right? And at that time, you know, $500,000 in revenue, that was a tough decision. But when you look at, you know, how many other customers we could serve from that, ended up being the right one. So
And staying true to yourself.
and staying true, right? Staying true to that vision, and of course, having validation and data behind, you know, the decisions you're making is really important as well, and not being blind to that. But it's a tricky balance. But great question. Yeah.
Going back to sales, you said you were spending the first few weeks just doing sales.
Yeah.
How did you go about identifying which account or which businesses you were going after, and how did you close?
Okay, great question. So how do we figure out who to go sell first, and then how do we close them? Great question. First one is just kind of trial and error and guessing, right? We're like, yeah, we think reviews will be good for like a mechanic, so let's go into a mechanic, right? And then, you know, the next week we'd go into like a spa or something, and we realized, oh, that might not be as good of a fit, right? They don't have like a massive marketing budget, or at that time, reviews wasn't a big deal. Now it is today, right? So totally trial and error. We'd go into business parks and just hit every single business. You know, we start with a dentist and go to a lawyer. Like we were just totally experimenting. So at first it's kind of that like spray and pray. Just go talk to anybody who you think would want to buy your product. But one of the key factors in our success today is once you do figure that out, then you really like focus in on what we call at Podium our strike zone. So we have our customers that we know you're this type of car dealership, we know you have this type of marketing budget, you're going to sign up with us, buy multiple products, and stay with us for a long time. So starting really wide, but honing in at the right time is super key. How we close them, we came up with all sorts of tactics. So I'll share a fun story. This is American Fork Ford. We looked up the GM beforehand, and our strategy was you walk in, you don't have bags, so you don't look like a salesperson, you look like you're there to buy a car or something. And you try to walk back to the end of the dealership as quick as you could and get past like all the salespeople, right? Because it's like sharks. They're like, hey, what are you here for? Like, can I show you a car? So we walk in, kind of head down in the zone, like going back to the GM's office. If we could get in the GM's office and pitch them, we felt like we could close them like 8 or 9 out of 10 times. We had a really high close rate if we could get back there talking with the GM. One of the tactics we had was if we could sit in his chair at his desk and be at his computer and have him sitting in the chair, like in front of the desk. And the way we pull that off is we start talking about the reviews, and we say, hey, we need to show you this. Have you seen your reviews lately, online? Like, you need to be talking to your customers and getting feedback and getting that online. That's how people, like, decide where to go. And he's like, no. Like, let me show you, right? So we'd say, hey, you know what? Can I show you on your computer right now? So he'd stand up, we'd sit in his chair, pull up their profile, he'd go around, sit in front of the desk, and by the end, you're in his desk closing him, and you've like totally done like the power switch, right? So early on, you got to figure out what you can do. There's all sorts of tactics we do to sell these guys, but in the end, it would help them out, and they'd be super happy with the product. And Honest One Auto is still a customer today, so it's fun. Great question.
In the early days, you brought on new team members. Did you give them equity? And if you did, like, how did you decide how much to give them? And how did you divide equity?
Great question. So for early team members, you give equity. How do you decide how much to give equity? And then what was the third part?
I think that's pretty
Okay. Yeah, so that's a great question. Ownership for early employees and even for employees today is really important in Podium, right? You need people to be bought in, and part of that is literally being like bought in and having a piece of an option to a piece of the company. So really it was part of like working with Sid and our investors and our advisors on figuring out how much to give. When I look back, there were certain people we were going to bring on and give a lot of equity to, and it didn't work out. And then we look back and think that was like a really good thing, that didn't happen. That's a tough one. At the beginning, you have to make it happen, right? Sometimes that requires giving away some of the company. And it's really tough, like especially at the beginning, even with investors and getting funding, you feel really, like it's really tough to give away part of your company, right? But then once you realize this person comes on, they take in, like Arthur, for example, he got some good equity as our first employee. And he came on, brought all the development in-house, laid the foundation for all the developers. Podium wouldn't be here today without him, right? So a small piece of equity for, what ended up creating the success of the business. You have to have that perspective and figure out how to get the people that are going to make the business work and get them early. So, does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah.
At the beginning, when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, you have a lot of negative self-talk. How do you push through that to get to the point of having a product and validating that? So, what did you do to keep yourself going, not knowing if it was going to be,
Yeah, so you battle, so the question, how do you battle negativity and like doubt, personal like self-doubt at the beginning? Because there's not a lot of validation, right? And you're putting in all this time and effort and into an idea, and you're wondering, some people are calling you crazy. You don't even want to share it with some people because you think it might be a failure and you might look stupid, right? So how do you deal with that? And the biggest thing for me was having the right partner. When I look back at certain times where I was like, we're done, like that was a fun run, like let's go think of a different idea. Usually Eric was like, no, like look at this opportunity, we can figure this out, we can go. And I remember and this is just a story to illustrate. So this was another time we talked about we're driving southbound on I-15. We had like 30 customers on the platform. We're feeling awesome. We had a Mitsubishi dealership in Orem that was just doing great on the product. They were really happy. They were getting a lot of Google reviews at the time. And they called us up and they said, hey, do you know like all of our reviews are gone on Google? Like we had like a lot of reviews and you guys were helping us out and they're all gone. We're like, oh, you know, like Google, they do stuff sometimes where they're updating the system, we'll check on it, let you know, we hang out and we're like, okay, that's it, the company's done, right? Like, you know, everything that we're helping these businesses do is gone, right? And it totally hit us hard. We figured it out, they got their reviews back. But in that moment, I think, you know, Eric was like, all right, yeah, we're totally done. And I was like, no, like we can do this, we can figure this out. And then other times, you just got to help your partner. So that's where like a strong co-founder that really can support you and kind of, you know, help you with those times is super important, because that doubt's going to come. You got to push through and keep, you know, believing and make sure that you're not, you know, doing that blindly and you have the validation there, but having somebody to support you was the biggest thing for me. Yeah, in the back.
So you first started selling to smaller companies.
Yeah.
How was your transition, or what challenges were you met with your transition to going into larger corporations and trying to sell them? And you still offer a product to those smaller businesses?
Yeah, so the primary like revenue in our business is still driven from those small businesses today. We're about 60% SMB, which is like the smaller businesses, and 40% of our revenue is from larger customers like Orkin Pest Control nationwide as a client, right? Paying us hundreds of thousands a year. So the nice thing is the product scaled pretty nicely, right? If it worked really well for a single location, if you had 10 or 20 or 30 locations, the product could work the same at every one of those locations, right? Which isn't the case with all software systems. For us, it scaled pretty nicely. So quickly, we realized, you know, this just doesn't work for this one dentist we sold, right? Like this can work for a whole chain of them. And obviously, there's a lot of efficiency and benefits that come from selling bigger companies. So we've definitely had to adjust for that on the product side. There's certain things that we had to build into the product and we took out as an initiative, like we need to serve these bigger clients better. But we still didn't neglect like our core of selling SMB, which traditionally is very difficult to do on a SaaS and a software standpoint. I remember one mentor saying, hey, I'm really concerned you guys are going to fail because you're not selling big businesses. But today, still, the majority of our revenue is generated from all of these small businesses that are signing on to the product with volume. So, great question. Last one?
Last one.
Okay, last question. In the back. There. You. Yeah.
When did you and your partner decide to quit your day job? Is there like a particular step in the startup process or a particular sell where you're like, okay, now we can quit our day job and just focus?
Yeah, great question. When do you quit your day job and just go full go, right? Kind of exciting but scary time to do that, to make that decision. If you think you have something good and dedicating all your time is going to make it even better. So for us, at the time, when Eric came back from working overseas, he didn't pick up a job right away. So he was like really motivated me. At the beginning, when we first started collaborating on the idea, he was calling back like, dude, let's start this today. And I'm like, well, you can come over. I'm working from home, and so let's just work on this thing, right? So a lot of working on the side at the beginning. 3 months after we started the idea, I decided to quit my day job. Still didn't get a paycheck for the next 8 months. So we were generating, or cash flow positive, we were generating revenue, we were just putting everything back in the bank of the business, and we wanted to have some funds there and recycle that back into the product and everything. So probably close to 8 to 10 months without a paycheck from when we, at least coming from Podium, maybe a little bit less of that time since I quit my job, right? So there was some risk there. Luckily, my wife was working and supporting me a little bit, but it only got close before we started pulling money out, which was kind of a scary time. So you got to make that leap, that jump of, when the right time is. I think, for the stage that everyone here is in, earlier in your career, the better to just, if you really feel passionate about it, try to go make it happen and dedicate all your time to it would be my advice. Okay. Final word of advice.